All right guys, welcome back. Now let me give you a little recap of what we've been doing on the charger, and then we'll get into what we're doing today. So in the past few videos of the charger, we've been working on the cooling system, and we've done the water pump, thermostat, did a full aluminum dual row radiator in there, new condenser for the AC, did this auxiliary trans cooler, and then we also did a big power steering cooler. And one of the things I wanted to do before we finalize all this is swap out this power steering pump and go ahead and clean all the old fluid out of here. And also we're going to swap to a 6-1 crank pulley. Now if you look, you compare that stock pre-Eagle crank pulley size to the 6-1, this is smaller, so it's actually going to underdrive the accessories. And while it's not a big deal, except for when it comes to the power steering pump, it'll turn it slower and make it live longer. What I got here is one from an SRT 8. Believe it or not, they are different part numbers compared to the 5.7 pumps. And trying to find exactly why is hard. But from what I've read, I think it has something to do with the valving inside here. This one probably holds higher pressure than the 5.7 pump. So we're going to rock it. Mine's whining anyway, so I'm just going to swap it out. Obviously, I'm going to need a new belt since we're going to a different size crank pulley. But having that smaller pulley and the SRT 8 pump, along with the bigger cooler down there, should help make that power steering pump live longer and be able to handle any kind of driving we decide to do with the charger. Now you can see here, I've already got the radiator fans pulled out of there, and that's just so I can get a puller down on the crank pulley. Obviously, if you're just doing the power steering pump, you don't need to worry about that. You just disconnect your lines, remove your bolts, obviously the belt first, swap them out, and you're good. Before I get started, I'm going to suck all the fluid out of the reservoir, probably take this out and clean it, and then same thing with that. Now we're not going to be able to get all the dirty fluid out of the system. There's still going to be a ton of fluid down in the rack, but eventually I do plan on dropping the rack out of this when I drop the subframe, so we'll get all the old fluid out of the rack then. So basically we'll have partial new fluid now, and when we drop the rack, we'll replace the fluid again, and it should be pretty much all new. Now, like I said, I'm going to start with getting rid of this fluid. Now, obviously, there's some fancier tools you can use to get the fluid out of here, but all I got is a syringe and a piece of hose, and we'll just slowly suck it out of there. It may take a little longer, but it'll do the job. All right, I got most of that fluid out of there. Now these just snap into the coolant reservoir. There's a little tab here. If you just push it over and work it out of there. Just like that. And I'm gonna go ahead and pull these lines off so I can actually clean this all the way out. I'm going to go ahead and get as much of this fluid out of these hoses as I can. All right, using that long hose on that syringe, I was able to feed it all the way down the line to get as much of that fluid out as possible. So now it'll be less of a mess when we go to take these lines off. Obviously, this line's gonna be full of fluid, but we should be pretty empty on that main line there. So what we're going to do now is remove the belt, and that way we can pull that power steering pump off. All right, now to pull the belt off, you just need a 3/8 ratchet, and it fits right in that hole on the tensioner. And to make life easy, use a jack handle. Just like that. All right, now we're going to break loose this line. It's an 18. And now all we have left is a series of 10 millimeters. There's access holes through the pulley. And I got my bolts swapped over to the new pump. And we'll go ahead and thread this one back on. Now, maybe I'll see this O-ring is pinched. So I want to swap the one that was on there, on the SRT pump. Slide that one down on my hose. And go ahead and screw that back in. And go ahead and put our hose back on. All right, we can call this wrapped. I need to get that power steering reservoir cleaned up. We can put that back in, fill the reservoir with fluid, and then once we get it all buttoned up, we'll start the car with the car in the air and just rotate the wheel back and forth. And that should bleed all the air out of the power steering lines. All right, I got my reservoir cleaned up. Now there is a screen inside here, so that's why you want to make sure it's clean. Make sure there's no debris sitting in that screen. So we can go ahead and pop these hoses back on. Sweet. All right, I'm going to start filling the system. It just takes ATF +4. Remember I got that huge power steering cooler in the front now. So I imagine it's probably going to take a couple quarts. Just fill the system. I'm sure that cooler takes a full quart. All right, well that wraps up the power steering side of things for right now. Obviously we still have to bleed it, so we're just gonna let that fluid sit. Hopefully it drains a little bit. While we wait, let's do the crank pulley. So the first thing we need to do is remove that bolt before we can put a puller on there. Now, with the radiator in the car, there's almost no room for an impact, unless you had a real stubby impact, but still, you're gonna be fighting room. So what I got going on here is, I just have the belt wrapped in a way, let's see, that it wraps over itself. See how it does that? So it's actually pinching itself. So as I turn the bolt and the pulley tries to turn, it's actually gonna wrap itself in the belt. And that'll hold the pulley in place to break that bolt loose. It doesn't really matter how you route the belt, as long as you can get it to fold over like this, on this side like that, so that as you turn this pinched part will get smashed by the belt. And that'll actually hold the pulley in place. And we'll do the same thing when we go to torque it. It'll just be the other side. We'll pinch it on this side, so as we turn it, that belt will bite on the pulley and we can torque it. All right, I got my breaker bar on there, 21 millimeter socket. I'm going to use jack handle for leverage. And see if that bolt will break loose. Yep, there it goes. reposition here. All right, it's loose. There we go. As far as pullers go, I think this was in a kit from Harbor Freight, like a 3-pack. This might be the middle size one. Basically, you need a 3-jaw because you have 3 openings. And they'll go in there and hook like that. And yeah, just crank on that and it'll pull it off. Now, this style puller is kind of a pain to use, mainly because they do not fit straight on. I think what I have to do is unbolt one of these and slide it in and then bolt it onto the puller after it's in the groove. So kind of a pain to set up, but it does the job and it's cheap. All right, I got the puller set up and I was right about what I said. I had to unbolt one of these, slide 2 in and then bolt the other one back in, just because they don't exactly fit through the slots straight on like this. They kind of have to be twisted and then locked in there. But now I'm just going to crank on that until it pulls it off. Bingo. All right, there they are. Now you can see the difference in diameter. The Pre-Eagle 5.7 is much larger than the 6.1, and 09 and up Eagle Hemis have this same diameter pulley also, so this only works for Pre-Eagles. Now you may have saw how I had to take one of these off to get that out. Same thing putting it in. I locked those 2 in and then slid this one in and threw the nut and bolt on it. Also, with this one maxed out, it wasn't enough, so I had to slide a bolt down inside like that, just to give it a little bit more to push on to get it the rest of the way there. Now also, I want to go over that belt trick one more time. So, to loosen the crank pulley bolt, what you need the belt to do, say this is the front of the engine, obviously, this is the top, this is the bottom. You want this side to do this. That way, when you try to turn this belt pinches and it can't turn. So it doesn't matter how you route the belt, as long as your end result is this. Now to torque it, we're going to do the same thing, except the pinch will be on the other side, so that, like that. So when you go to turn and torque this, it pinches the belt here and can't turn. No special tools needed, just need your old belt. You can get that right off of there. Now you know we can't put this on looking like that, so let me clean this up. All right, that's much better. Let's throw that on. All right, I got it started on there. What I like to do is get it on there and then take a hammer or rubber mallet or something, just lightly tap it all the way around just to start getting it seated on the crank. Obviously, you don't want to use a hammer or something to pound this on. I'm just saying just to get it started on the end of the crank. Now, don't try to use your stock bolt to pull that crank pulley on. With it sitting there, you'll barely have any thread engagement. So definitely don't want to strip that bolt out or the end of the crank. So I got a longer bolt and I just found some stuff to space it so it would be the right length to get in there and pull the crank pulley on. So I'll use this to get it most of the way, and then once I get it on there pretty far, then I'll switch to the crank bolt and get it all the way finished. Now obviously it's very important to make sure the bolt that you're using to pull that crank in has enough thread engagement before you start cranking on it. Strip the crank out you're in for a bad time. Yeah, that stock bolt now has lots of thread engagement, so we should be good. All right, there's tight. We're turning the engine. And just like I explained before, you can see down there I got the belt wrapped under itself, under the crank pulley. So as I try to crank on that crank pulley bolt, and that crank pulley is going to want to spin like this, it's going to fold the belt on in itself, keeping the crank pulley from moving. All right, and the torque on that bolt is 129 foot-pounds. All right, and as you saw, the way I have the belt, no problem torquing that bolt. So let me get this old belt off, and we'll put the new 6.1 spec belt on, and I'm gonna throw my fans in. We can finally start this thing. All right, 6.1 belt is on. Fans are in. It did drink a little bit of the fluid, so I'll probably just top that off just a little bit, because we're definitely gonna drink some once we start this thing. All right, here we go. Slowly getting quieter. We're still kind of noisy. It's full. Any other leaks? Oh, got a leak. My leak is right there. I totally forgot that I loosened this when I first got the condenser, and I never tightened it. All right, I got that leak fixed. Power steering pump is quiet finally. It took a little bit. Fluid level looks okay. No more leak back there. No leaks there. No leak down there. Cool. No noise from the steering. Sounds good. All right, we're all wrapped up. Car's back on the ground, the bumper's on. Let's go check out those coolers. All right, there you can see the transmission cooler. And then just see the power steering cooler. Everything looks good. All right, I'm gonna put some miles on this thing. It's probably gonna need some transmission fluid eventually, so I'll probably have to top that off and check the power steering fluid. But I'm curious to see if it feels any different having the SRT8 power steering pump and the SRT8 crank pulley. So whenever we do the next video on the Charger, I'll give you guys an update on how it feels, if it felt any different, if I noticed anything. But I know we covered a lot in this video, in the past few videos, but hopefully it helps some guys. And if you're just looking to replace a power steering pump or something, now you know how. But we're slowly ticking away at all the little things to make sure the Charger is reliable and before we start adding power. So appreciate all the new subscribers. Thanks for watching the videos, and I'll see you on the next one.